whichever kind of designer you are, chances are that you deal with day in day out with type, and that nuances around type and type design, when you understand those, can make your design stand out, can add that quality, that character to the design. And today we're gonna get started with the basics. What's up, folks? Today we have Niteesh Yadav finally on my YouTube channel and talk about the basics of typography. And today we're going to get into what the hell is typography and bust some myths around typography. And people confuse certain terminology or don't understand what do you even mean typeface? What does it take? Can I just sit at home and draw out some letters and will that become typeface? And all of those questions, we're going to look at a very quick brief of what typography is, how it works, and a bunch of other questions related to that. His history, he worked with Paytm. He started his career as a UI designer, did quite a bunch of fields, including graphic, narrative design, artwork, and then eventually, heavily focused on UI eventually, and then got into type. And then he went on to study type design, did masters from University of Reading.
It's University of Reading.
From University of Reading. Is that I say that correctly, Niteesh?
Yep. So I'm a product designer, and then something which makes me quite unique. Most of the product designers in the industry is because I'm also a type designer. Kind of replies which when I introduce myself as a type designer, then what kind of things people think about me. I'll get into those details later. So over last 8 to 9 years, I have been into design. So there was a common thread which was connecting all the design domains. So be it product design, be it designing basic interfaces or doing just a basic website, versus if I'm designing maybe something brochure or maybe any print collateral, then one of the major thing which was quite common across all the design domains was typography. So that's when I decided, okay, I'll focus on the kind of thread, connecting thread. And then I explored more about typography, and then I got to know more about type design, which is something where I'll share, I'll bust few myths. So maybe even if you are copying design as in you are learning through mimicking design which are by famous designers and all those people, and then you tend to find okay, I have done the same kind of, I have tried to recreate the whole thing, and then but still there is something which is missing. And then those are if you once I get down to sharing details about typography, then you'll realize that those simple nuances are some are based out of what your decisions are there in terms of visual aspects, versus a lot of the nuances are there hidden inside typography. Even if you are using a very exact replica or the same typeface, then you are not able to judge how it is looking different, why the person who has designed the thing you're recreating is looking quite different. So in those kind of aspects, these small nuances are something which kind of take you to the next level, where your design becomes very not just pleasing to the eye, but again it serves different kind of functions. So one other thing where it's almost whenever I have been asking questions from people okay, what do you want to learn about typography? So there has been a huge kind of gap in terms of people don't know what typography really is. And then whenever I talk about typography, then before we jump onto typography, before you kind of start with typography, the basic fact is you have to have a typeface to do typography. And then why I am saying this, let's get to it and then know about it. I'm introducing myself as a product and type designer. Then I tend to kind of get this okay, do you do calligraphy, and then you kind of do lettering. You just you
do you have any examples, Niteesh? Some of the folks may not have any clue what is still as to what you mean by these different terms.
So now let's jump on to understanding what typography really is and how it is different from calligraphy and lettering. Basically, the moment you use this word typography is not about drawing anything. It's not about drawing letters or doing calligraphy. Typography is arranging type. And the moment I say type means existing typefaces, or which is a bastardized term, which is font, where so that's another conversation, or maybe I'll pick it up after this. Basically arranging type is where you have existing typefaces, and then you have a text which is there in front of you. So maybe you are setting text on a book, maybe you are like setting text on a web page. Whenever you are setting those like text, and then how you are designing the layout for them, that is typography. And then like if you're a designer, and then if you are a graphic designer, if you're a product designer, you are most probably like you can call yourself a typographer, because you are arranging type in that case. And like the most of the confusion which is there, it's almost like a lot of people are getting confused with the terms like calligraphy and lettering. There are projects like, okay, there are campaigns of projects running like 36 days of type, where people draw random kind of like illustrations and then those kind of things, and then people tend to think like they are doing typography, or maybe they are doing like they are designing type, but that is not type. And then once we move further, I'll tell you why using even the word type for them is quite wrong. Moving further, basically calligraphy, what calligraphy is all about is it's about tools. So if you have if you have a copper plate pen which expands, versus if you have a pen which is a like flat nib pen or round nib pen, so in that case, like the whole kind of function which is there in terms of calligraphy is it's tool based. It's like if a tool changes, then the design changes. And then in calligraphy, what you do is it's just like muscle memory. You train your like muscles to kind of work on. So basically in calligraphy, what happens is there is a set kind of way to like render different kind of designs, where it's almost like whenever you're doing a downstroke, then you put on more pressure, then that's like how you get thicker strokes, versus like whenever you're doing upper movement, then you release the kind of pressure which you exert on your pen, and then that's how you get those nice, very elegant, thick and thins. So this is all about typography, calligraphy, where it's almost like you are training yourself, like you're training your muscles to do it. And then basically one of the best example would be like, okay, learning to swim, where you like once you learn it, like it tends to be there like forever. But again, in that case, like you have to practice like calligraphy for a longer time, and then it may or may not stay for that long. So it totally depends on you.
Right.
Further on, moving to lettering. So once you are doing lettering is not tool based. It's all about like illustrations of letters. So you are drawing letters. So in calligraphy, what tends to happen is you use a single stroke. You move your pen in a single stroke to design a A, or like maybe 2 to 3 different strokes to design a particular character. But in lettering, what happens is you are drawing those letters. You are like simulating like maybe calligraphy effect. Like, okay, if like that. So if you compare these two designs on your screen, so one like on like when you see calligraphy, it is like just single strokes or like 2-3 strokes to draw like specific character. And then in lettering, what you are specifically doing is you are illustrating letters. So you can draw it in any form. You can like use multiple strokes. You can just scribble around, and then you get to a structure of the letter. And then that's how it is different from calligraphy versus like what you do in lettering.
Just to summarize, type design, which is designing typefaces, is different from arranging type, which is typography, is different from muscle memory and the art of rendering continuous letters, which is calligraphy, and specifically drawing letters for a specific purpose, like 36 days of type and illustrated characters, which is lettering. Did I get that correctly, Niteesh?
Yeah, almost. So once I use the term type design is all about like designing system of letters. So type design happens like where once you start, like you are designing all the characters, all the letters in terms of like where they work in every possible case. So in lettering, so how now I'll get back to like how it is going to be different from whatever you. So basically, if you're designing a logo, and then you have designed certain characters, and then just imagine the company name is maybe so Apple or something like that. In that case, like what happens is you have designed characters like A, E, L, and E. And then what happens is you have so maybe if there is interlocking, if the design is something like, or I can take one of the best example I can take would be like maybe Coca-Cola, where it's almost like in that case, like just imagine if you are picking up a certain character. So if you put the O in front, like before C, then it might not work. And then if you like put L before like LOCA, whatever that kind of arrangement is there. So in case of lettering, you design for a specific scenario. Specific scenario means like you are designing it for a particular spelling or whatever the name is, versus how it changes in terms of like typeface design is, all the characters are designed such that if you do like, if you arrange it, if you keep it in any order, then it works. And then and once we move, I'll see there is a whole kind of testing which is being which has to be done before the typeface goes out. And then this is a major kind of basic difference where the letters have to work seamlessly across different kind of arrangements, where you can arrange them in any order, and then they'll still work. It will not break in terms of spacing, in terms of like how like the E interacts with R next to it, or S interacts with T next to it. And then this is how like the system proceeds, and then it doesn't break. Like a nicely designed typeface, or if it is a typeface design not by a novice but by a
professional,
then the quality is quite different. And then we'll also like, I'll tell you one of the major reasons why I never recommend that you use free typefaces from like websites like Dafont or all those kind of things. So in that case, like you lose on a lot of different aspects, which we'll discuss later.
I'm supremely looking forward to this Dafont mystery, because I can imagine so many years that I have been addicted to Dafont like a typical graphic designer out there, right?
So now if you see, this is this is how a font file looks like. So this is specifically like font file in terms of this application is called glyphs, which is used to design typefaces. So in my projects also, like I have been designing glyphs for a very long time. And then so just imagine like how the people think like, okay, I have designed. So even if you're designing a basic like typeface for Latin, which is if you're using it for English, then people think like, okay, I'll design like ABCD and then till Z, like, oh, I'll design capital letters and then my font is ready. No, that is not even a font. Like that is not even like a basic structure which is ready to be rolled out. So in that case, like you have to design all the characters in terms of like how the punctuation is going to be, like how the like different kind of basically punctuation, then comes your numbers, then comes your different kind of different special characters which are there. So your font is not just like maybe 60 characters or something like that. So in case of like Latin, it might expand up to like maybe 200 characters. This is a rough estimate. Or maybe if you're designing least amount of characters, then you tend to like design at least to a level like 100 characters, which includes your basic like capital versions versus like lowercase letters, and then you include numbers, and then like at least the basic amount of punctuation marks and all those kind of things. So this is how like a basic system looks, and then how it is being designed. So this is another major question which comes in. Okay, you have like so many fonts available right now, or so many typefaces available at this moment. Then why there is a need like that we need type designers keep on designing new typefaces? So in that case, like just like any kind of design project goes, like in typefaces are designed for specific kind of purposes. So some are there for like specific visual appeal. So where it's almost like, just imagine you have to design a children's book, and then in that case, like you need something. So one of the specific kind of so in terms of one thing is the how it looks. That's there. But again, there is a science behind it. And then I'll give you a basic example. So just imagine if you are giving kids maybe a like this. So can you see my cursor? Is it in that case? Just see that a, and then if you like kind of use that a in children's book or like all kind of those kind of structures, the kid won't be able to recognize that it is a, because just imagine when you were a kid, then the first thing we are taught is a single story a, which is like just a rounded block with a straight line. So in that case, there are different kind of considerations. So even G's, the kind of G which we tend to see is a double story G, versus what kids are used to seeing is totally different. So those are the kind of things where it's almost like where visual appeal comes into play, where what kind of scenario you are designing for. Visual appeal can be described as maybe using sans serif typefaces versus serif typefaces. So what kind of mood you want to convey through your document. So in that case, like this is one scenario which is there. Then comes like a medium specific thing. So the typefaces are designed for like books are totally different from typefaces which are being designed for screen. And then if you are a good typographer, if you are if you know your basic, you have research, then you'll know like what are the kind of nuances that you have to pay attention to while using, like maybe there are certain typefaces which you can use in both scenarios, they'll still work. But again, it is quite recommended that you use specific typefaces which are designed for that specific scenario. So in this case, like you can see this example on the right, where it's almost like Apple Watch. So the typeface which is being so you can't use standard like San Francisco typeface for like watches. This is a San Francisco version designed, a compact version designed for like these Apple Watches. And then one of the major reason is, just imagine in this case, like medium specific case, when it comes into play, is like it's a very technical aspect where it's almost like, just imagine now if you're using maybe a typeface which I'm using right now right here in my presentation. If I use that in like Apple Watch, then instead of like having what I have in front of me is 5 lines, I will be able to just cover that text in maybe like 7 to 10 lines using this kind of a wider structure. So there are different kind of medium based challenges that we solve through different kind of typefaces. So that's another reason to why we design more typefaces. Some are experimental typefaces where you let your imagination flow, and then you do different kind of new stuff, like different kind of new experimental phases, where it's almost like this tend to go a lot in terms of like editorials, where you need funky stuff, where you need a different kind of typefaces which grab people's attention. And then maybe like experimental, one of the I think good example can be maybe something designed for fashion-based magazine, versus if you are like designing for a very regular base, like any purpose-based book or something like that. The level experimental typeface would totally different in these two kind of applications. And then another would be like something which is medium specific, can be related to medium specific, but are designed for very specific challenges. So once I say specific challenges, so something like, okay, I'm working on typefaces for augmented reality headsets, which is a specific kind of challenge, because it is so the kind of layouts, the kind of interfaces which are there are totally different from how we kind of read text in book versus how we kind of read in terms of like our screens. So those are specific kind of challenges. And then even in this case, like one of the good example would be this typeface like Bookerly. Bookerly is the one, the typeface which is being using Kindle devices. So that is another good example where it's almost like once you are designing for different kind of scenario, then you have to design for it like specifically, because it is low resolution, it has different kind of different limitations. Then you design for those kind of challenges. If you want to like search for specific challenge based like typefaces, then the best example that comes into play is Bell Centennial. So this diagram on the right, like below, is Bell Centennial typeface. So there was a time where like Bell Centennial was designed for phone books, like by Bell Corporation. And then in that time, what was happening is, just if you remember, we had these old phone books. And then there are those huge phone books. And then if you like just imagine in this case, like you are printing numbers of like maybe thousands of people, like maybe lakhs in terms of like number of phone directory has that kind of information. And then just imagine maybe at that point of time, one of the popular typefaces, if I like in terms of era, in terms of usage, if I remember, can be Helvetica, which I hate, to be honest. It's a separate conversation. What happens is if you use Helvetica in that kind of case, then just imagine like a book was supposed to be like maybe 2 centimeter thick. Is if you're using Helvetica for all those phone numbers, then it becomes like maybe 5 centimeters to 10. So it becomes a very huge book that it's become a proper, like if we go with Hindi terms, it becomes a poti.
Wow.
So in that case, and then another added challenge while designing Bell Centennial was that first it was being distributed for free. Then you have to like the production cost has to be low. Then if the production cost has to be low, then like what are the like physical challenges you come across? Like you produce in bulk, but that was possible at that point of time because it was a huge. The whole directories were being designed in bulk and like mass produced. But again, like just imagine like if you're using a really nice paper or even the like standard paper, then the cost really goes high. And then this is a similar kind of scenario which happens with newspapers. So since those are mass produced and then those are to be distributed at a very cheaper price, then you go for very coarse paper, and then which is very like cost effective. So in that case, like if you go for those kind of scenarios, and then if you're using coarse paper, then what happens is, so if the ink is being so once you print on those kind of coarse papers and then like cheap paper, or maybe if you remember like those brown notebooks, not brown but gray notebooks, cheap rough notebooks, which I don't know if those are still available in the market, but we used to get those for rough work and all those kind of things. So in that case, just imagine writing using a ink pen or fountain pen on those kind of pages. Yeah,
no way.
Yeah, that is the kind of mayhem which happens if you try to print stuff, like print specific kind of using typefaces like Helvetica or any other typeface which was designed for like a very defined, like good paper. So in that case, like Bell Centennial was specifically designed for those scenarios, where in these you see these kind of circles, but I think it won't be quite visible in this, but maybe if later on you can search for it, Bell Centennial. So Bell Centennial like introduced a very interesting concept which is called ink traps. In that case, like wherever the joints were, like there was a blot of which used to happen, or there used to be a like excess amount of ink which used to come there. So in that case, like that kind of problem was solved in Bell Centennial, introducing ink traps. So in ink traps, what it means is, like in that case, like wherever the joints were, so instead of having like these straight joints, what was like they kind of took away basic text from there, or like basic shape, and then made it slightly hollow, so that like once the ink comes into like contact together at that stroke, then even if it is kind of getting spread, then that negative space used to fill that up. So in that case, you were designing a very like different ugly looking like design, but at the end what the product you were getting was like something which gave you a proper kind of text design, or the proper shape of the, like maybe in this case, if you have taken away that black part from N at the top, so once you print it, you won't be able to recognize that it was being taken away. So these are the kind of specific challenge, like basic scenarios, that how you design for specific challenges, and then which can range from like different like mediums, or like different kind of maybe scenarios, which can be probably in case like I have told you about AR, or versus like this example in terms of like printing on like very cheap and fine paper. Using a new typeface was much more cheaper than like printing multi-million copies of like these phone books. So that is like one of the decisions how new typefaces are designed, or how new typefaces are commissioned to type designers, that when there is a new need, it has to be business friendly. And then this is how you save money by solving problem through kind of different kind of applications.
Right.
And
And
in
same
this
kind
case,
of thing would happen for when you come give example of specific challenges. For example, we moved earlier, we had CRT based technology for
yeah,
screens, and all those news thingies that went on would be made differently, I'm guessing. Then let's say we do the same thing for Hindi and Indian languages, and then we change to something like a 4K screen or LCD 1080p
yeah.
screen, and then you may have the old typefaces may not work the same way, I'm guessing, right? Like, is
Yeah.
that also like some example of like specific medium specific and specific challenge related typefaces?
Yeah, it's there, and then I'll tell like later on. I have this small section where I'll tell you like how. So again, getting back to that whole fact, like downloading a font from Dafont versus buying a font, or maybe using a good design fonts from
Right.
free resources like Google Fonts. How it is quite different. People tend, whenever I tell them like, okay, it's about typeface design. People just say like, okay, you do you design whatever comes to your mind. So that's totally not the case. Every typeface has a very particular brief, just like any design project, that it has to go through certain kind of scenarios. And then I'll take you through the whole journey, like how a typeface is designed. So further, so this is a specific journey of a typeface, how it is designed. So it goes from like basically first, so like a typeface design project doesn't start till the time you have a design brief, where it's almost like what so I'll go into details like with all these points. So it's like you have to design the brief, then you have to research about like what are the considerations that you have taken. So maybe I am designing for AR, then what I have to do research in terms of like what are the limitations in that kind of case, and then I have to come up with solutions in that scenario. And then once the solutions arrive, solutions can be in different kind of characteristics. So what kind of design solves that kind of problem? So that then you go down to like defining okay, maybe in this case, like I think like serif, very thin serifs won't work. Then I'll go to like that is one kind of characteristics. So I'll have to make thicker serifs if I'm going for a serif typeface. So these are the kind of characteristics which you define and then write. Then you kind of go to your like paper or sketch, like your sketching phase, where you have the basic idea of like how it should look like, what it should look like. It's not like something that we directly jump onto like sketching whatever ideas we have in mind. So there has to like be like earlier 3 steps before jumping onto sketching. People do like paper-based sketching, and then some people directly like if you talk about like big shots in the industry, they just like jump into, because they have everything clear in their mind. They don't even bother to sketch. They just directly go on to like design software, and then they start designing, which is again another way, because they have their concepts clear in their mind. So that's another step. And then once that is done, so this is like, okay, by till this like this step, if we talk about like maybe you people would be getting confused. Okay, it looks quite similar to like what I do in lettering. So I just sketch and then I do like convert into vector design. So that's how where your lettering ends. That's where like, your basic whatever things you have confusion. So a lot of people just like ping me that how can I design a typeface, like I have designed these much characters. So typeface is not just about like those like ABCD till Z. The whole whole game starts after that. So now it's almost like from once you have designed your basic characters, then you jump onto words. You design words, and then after that, like once that is done, then in this case, like maybe once so if I say like this basic phase is your Dafont phase, there where people like design basic characters and then it's done. Then let some people spend time in terms of like maybe checking it for different kind of words. Then again, that's a slightly decent level. So once that is done, after that comes your like major game. So this this is the very fun part of like these steps. Like initial steps are very fun part as a type designer, because you are exploring new ideas. But again, the major time taking or time consuming part is doing the metrics. And then I'll tell I'll define it further, like what metrics and kerning, how that goes in. That's the time where like as a type designer you hate yourself at times, and you hate your like life. And then like you move on further to like expanding your families. So once your like basic regular weight is complete, then you move on to designing different weights. Like maybe you go to bold, you go to italic, or maybe you just like switch to designing another language, another script. So that's how the process continues further.
Right. I have so many questions. Like, I so want to see metrics and kerning. What do they look like? What do you mean? And like, isn't like adding new weight just like making everything thicker? Like just like add a
Yeah,
stroke,
that's the thing.
and it should work, right? Like I'm so excited to look forward to like why is it so challenging? Let's go for it.
Cool. So further again, I was telling you about defining characteristics. Characteristics is basically, okay, what I have to derive. What is the basic purpose of my typeface? In that case, it's almost like these are few of the things like which I take into consideration. Where it's almost like it's not even like 1% of characteristics which you have to define before designing a typeface. So basically, just imagining like these are very basic examples. So if I am designing the typeface for text usage, so maybe I am designing it for body copy, like being used for paragraphs. So that would be totally different versus like designing it for display. When I use the word display, that means it is going to be used at like bigger sizes. And then just imagine it can be bigger sizes in terms of headings versus bigger sizes in terms of like maybe text being used in your codings. How does it look? So in that case, like you have to take into consideration what your end use is, and then based on that, like you the design decisions change drastically. And then further, I think I can give you a few examples. And then again, we have discussed about the mediums. What is it being designed for a book? Is it being designed for interfaces? It is being designed for a specific interface, which is like a mobile interface versus like a reader, like a book reader like Kindle or something like that. So that's your medium. And then what are the kind of languages that I want to cover with it? Do I just like want to be limited with English and few other like Latin based script, or like maybe I just want to include like Western European like script. So if you are designing a typeface, if you design A to Z, that's not the end of, you're not even covering most of the English characters, because so maybe English is basically covered, but again, you won't be able to kind of use it for different languages which like do adopt English, but again, they have special kind of characters which are into play. So those kind of considerations you have to you have to consider at that point of time. Language is another thing. Then beyond language, you move to scripts. So once I say script, I've been using one word very like extensively. Is instead of using English, I'm using Latin, because Latin is the base like script to like write English words, and then Latin includes like other Western European languages as well. So in this case, like one is Latin, and then once I move beyond Latin, so maybe I am designing for Arabic, I am designing for Devanagari. Devanagari is a script like the parent script, which is used to write if you're writing in Hindi or you're writing Marathi, then the main script which is used is Devanagari. And then it's not quite right to use these interchangeably in terms of like script and languages, because they mean quite different. And then maybe if you can just Google, and then you'll know more about it. Moving beyond that, like you have stylistic alternates, which comes under open type features. So it's almost like, just imagine even a single typeface. Now I can like provide you different kind of letters. So just imagine in this case, if you carefully see that like example, which is the A. So if you see the A on the left, so this is the same typeface which I'm using. It's Halyard. And then on the left, you see the A is quite different versus the A on the right. So if you can see the tail happening around that area. So now I have the flexibility in terms of like different stylistic alternates. So I can provide more than like 2 to 3 designs of a single character. And so it's just imagine, in this case, earlier I've given you example of like kids book. So in that case, like I can even, so this is a double story A, and then I can even I can even design a single story A, which is your basic like rounded A with straight line. That's it. I think it has been there in my school, and I think that has been a major problem in across India. So if you see different books set like mathematics book, so the kind of layout which they have versus what we used to get in our exam papers was quite different, where like they and those were makeshift marks in terms of like, okay, they'll use dash 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 versus like hyphen to create like brackets and all those kind of things. So that means like if you are doing a like project, or if you are designing for a purpose of like where you need mathematical characters, and then if you are doing that, then like basically you can just say that you have done the biggest mistake because you don't know about typography, because that typeface is not designed for that purpose. There's a typeface which is designed for like considering science symbols or mathematics symbols. Then they'll have all those characters available for you, where the bigger blocks are available, where all your function signs are available, not your F being replaced for function. So that's the kind of characteristics which are being designed. So and then that's how you kind of, even when you're making a decision that I am designing for maybe so as a product designer, I am designing courses for kids, and then in that case, like if I have to do these makeshift changes, then your fundamentally your typography is totally wrong. In that case, once you're trying to find your typefaces, then you have to find typefaces which are specifically designed for like science, keeping in mind science, or your mathematical symbols.
I totally remember seeing those examination sheets, and the fractions, was they were using flashes. And instead of superscript or subscript, some teachers clearly did not know that function existed in Word.
This reminds me of another great thing. So in most of the typefaces which you kind of see, what happens is once you hit that superscript or subscript, so most of the free typefaces or most of the typefaces don't have a specific glyph designed for superscript or subscript. So what happens is, just imagine you'll see a weight difference. So if you are writing like a to the power, so maybe even like just numbers, I think you can like do this experiment with any of your typeface which you have installed in your computer. So how to recognize that it's not like the glyph set is not full, or like it's a well-designed font, because in that case what happens is, so there would be a difference in terms of the weight. So if you use superscript, then you'll see that so maybe just imagine you are doing this basic equation like 2 raised to the power 2, and then that another, or 2 raised to the power 4. Then in that case, what happens is your 4 will look quite thin, because it's like a Fox version of like basic numbers. Then what is being done is your program is just kind of squeezing that number and then resizing it, and then it's placing there. Versus if it is a like properly designed typeface, which like brings me to another characteristics, which is like open type features in terms of like superscript. So if it is a nicely designed typeface, then what will happen is, so if the character set is available, if your superscript 2 numbers are available, then that 4 will get replaced by a 4 which was designed for superscript. A whole thing is set like what I am designing for, what are the basic characteristics I'm looking for. Then we jump onto like a sketching phase, where it's almost like doing very rough sketches in how it should look, and then like maybe some people prefer to kind of ink those so that like they get a better understanding, and then to like how it will look. And then but again, in this case, you are just designing the basic characters. Most of the things change once you kind of get on to designing these, because when you design bigger, then you don't see like what are once you squeeze these in a smaller sizes, how it will look is totally different. So that's how the whole kind of so the whole typeface game is more about visual compensations, which is like you need to have that kind of, you have to train yourself to see those kind of changes. And then whatever you so in this case, what I will say is like, okay, if you are designing, so in lettering you design for a bigger case, and then once you squeeze those in, so how a lot of things will look quite different. And then again, those kind of considerations come in, and then you have to take those kind of decisions once you start like kind of designing. hit and trial method in terms of understanding. So if you're a newbie, then it's quite a hit and trial method. But as you progress in terms of in your career, then you kind of understand how like a thicker stroke will work with a thin stroke next to it. So these are the kind of things which which type designers learn across their journey while designing different kind of typefaces. So once you have sketched, then you move on to softwares like Glyph, and then you design different letters. So this is from my project Aaron, which is for being designed for AR headsets. Once your basic shape is ready, and then this is again till now what I've been doing is basically if I'm just drawing, then this is lettering. What I'm doing is I can just replace it, and then I can design a basic word from it, and then basic lettering stops here. Now where it goes is, this is what I meant by designing systems. This has become quite a standard that first few characters which we design as type designers it's called, we use it as adhesion. So ADHESION, these are the initial characters which we design. And then how the testing works is, now if you have designed your N, and then you have designed your O, then you'll test it across different characters. So I'll place it next to O, and then how it looks. Then I'll so if I go back, then if you go down and then see these values at the bottom, so on the right you see your the spacing. So this is your so these are called side bearings. So whatever space is there between the outline box, this glyph box, and the character. So just imagine just seeing this. So this is 25 units, and then versus here it's 52 units. So this is the system I was talking about. So this spacing doesn't change for every character. And then later on, I'll tell you this is all about your whole kerning, what kerning is all about. That this 25, so this spacing works with if I place a B next to it, if I place a O next to it, and then those O's will also have their side bearings. So that in that case, in this case, just imagine you can see different numbers. So here, you will see these side bearings. So it's 38. And then in this case, the side bearing so this is your right side bearing for O, which is 49, versus in this, the left side bearing of N is 38. So these values have to be normalized. These values have to be tested so that they can work. And then this is how testing works. So if I'm designing, if I've designed A, then it has to even work for when it is kept next to A, versus it's it is being, so the next letter becomes B. So this is the kind of system which goes into play, even for designing a single character, and then doing all the maths behind it, and then that it works in all scenarios. Once you have designed your basic characters, so your basic glyphs. So I've designed my A. I've designed my basic maybe I just designed adhesion, ADHESION. Now I move on to designing words. So in words is so at times so it's not always possible to make words from these just basic characters. So we use different tools that we create random words out of these few characters which we have designed, and then test them in terms of how the basic character spacing is working. This is very visual thing that once you see a badly spaced typeface, you will always think there is something wrong, but you won't be able to know. And then that's the job of the type designer, to get rid of all those kind of different problems which are there. In this case, if you see these red mark, the places where it's highlighted, so these are the areas which might to a normal eye will look like that spacing is right, but it's not right. And then it's then you have to go through these different kind of random strings of text, different words, and then you have to find out where the spacing is breaking. So in this case, just imagine the spacing is breaking between B, E, and M, and then we have to mark for that. And then and then in this case, okay, so just imagine in the so if you see. So maybe it would be whenever you are seeing this video, you can compare this, maybe you pause the video and then see if this D and then versus, and it's slightly off, if it when it is placed next to E, versus it might work in different combinations, but in this case it's not working. So as a
Right. It's working
clarifier,
with DAD in DAD, but it's not
yeah,
working in DEA.
yeah. So this is like where the whole kind of work goes in, where you have to make it work with every possible letter which is there. And then so just imagine it's in this case like every possible character plus like numbers plus like different punctuation marks and everything. So you have to work for that, and then you have to expand the system and then make it like seamless in terms of like that it is going to work with this basic spacing values. So, and then once this spacing is done, then we'll move on to another fact, like we'll move on to kerning. So you can't solve all this problems with just like spacing. So if I've just like there is a character, like there is a A, and then that A will work with most of the conditions, but in certain special cases, what happens is it might not. So if you are doing the spacing, so in this case, special cases would be something like V and A. So if I do the spacing in this case, like I have to overlap the characters. I have to, so I've shown you those bounding box of the characters. Then if I do negative spacing for the whole character, then it won't work, because in that case, like if in this case, like I have done negative spacing. So I have done like negative 7 value for the spacing itself. Then what will happen is if I place this A next to N, then they will overlap, because it will be like -7 inside that box. So this is where your like spacing ends, and then comes your like kerning. In kerning, what means is like we have specific pairs, and then we have specific cases which can't be solved through spacing. Then we make like certain combinations that when A is next to S. Okay, if you see these kerning pairs, so in these, how E will look next to A, then I have to do -20, and then maybe in my like regular spacing value, that value was like +20 or +30, but now and that like it has to be placed next to A, then it has to be -20, versus like that E is being placed next to M, then it has to be like another value or whatever that value is. So this is the area where your proper like kerning comes into play. And then you'll know, like if you have to kern your typeface that you are using, then you know you're not using the right typeface. Type designers take care of all the dirty work which you think like which you tend to do at times, that if you're sitting and doing kerning. So if it was being designed, if it was not designed by someone just for the heck of designing a typeface, if it was properly designed by a type foundry, then they take care of most of these cases. Then you might have to like fix for maybe 1% of the scenario, versus like a badly designed typeface where you have to do kerning yourself. Talking about downloading from Dafont versus downloading from like
buying a professional font.
Yeah. And then it's so basically people tend to think like free fonts are not good. But again, in that case, like I would recommend using, if you're using free typefaces, it's better to stick to sources like I would always recommend using Google Fonts, because Google Font, the fonts which are there in the library, Google Font library, are designed by most of the like renowned type foundries across the world. So in that case, like what happens is it's not a free font, it's free for you, but Google is paying the type foundries to produce these fonts. So it's almost like, so if I am getting money and then if I am designing a font, then I will put like proper effort to it and then I'll release it. Versus if I'm just like designing it for fun, then I have to like take into consideration how much time I spend onto it. So this is the basic like designing a free project versus designing a commission project. This is how the major difference comes in.
I think this is why it takes so long to design a font, and this is why we pay so much for it.
And then I'll tell you, like, even if I'm, so how much time, so people tend to think like, okay, I'll design a font within a week. So even if you are a very pro, then starting from conceptualization to like different initial steps, even the smallest amount of time which people take is a minimum like a couple of months to get to at least the basic regular ready for like basic production. And then you expand.
Wow. And speaking of expanding,
yeah. Speaking of expansions, are like two kinds of expansions, or like there are multiple. But I'll like cover two in this case, where it's almost like expansion can be like basic weight expansion. I want bold to like get a certain kind of flavor to the text, and then I want bold for my headings, all those kind of things, and then I want emphasis, then I need bold, and then I need semi bold for different kind of purpose and all those kind of things. So this is like expansion in terms of weight. And then there is a style expansion. Style would be italic. I need italic because it has a different kind of purpose to itself. Plus, there is a very, I would say, so just imagine a purpose-based expansion where it's almost like there are certain kind of, so if you see on the right, this is like, if your typeface has a version which is called micro, that means that version is designed for like smaller text sizes. So just imagine when I say smaller text sizes is when you go below. So there is a basic classification, I would say, like this is how I treat it, and then a lot of people treat it. People have like certain different values to classify it. But again, from 1 point type to 12 point type, or maybe just in this case, let's assume 12 pixels, from 1 pixel to 12 pixel, that comes under like small text. And then for that, like microweights are designed. And then then you can move on to like regular weights, which is like your regular, maybe in this case, or maybe I'll just take a basic example, which can be like Roboto regular, Roboto semi-bold, and all those kind of things. In that case, like those, most of them, or I think the best example would be at this point of time where you can even take reference would be SFUI versus your SF display. Are like quite different. And then those are like, once you move beyond maybe 36 size or maybe 30, above that you tend to use display versions. So this is how it is being designed. And then micro versions are like, once you are designing, so micro versions are, so just imagine in smaller text. So if you have these smaller captions, and then if you have those kind of like different references. So in books, you have a reference text below, bottom, or like all those kind of things. So then microweights are very kind of useful in those kind of scenarios where, you know, because in that case, what kind of different changes which come into place. So if your like X typeface, whichever is there, has a regular version, which is like maybe just like 10 unit by maybe just 10 unit wide, and then so the X height is maybe 6 units or something like that. And then what will happen is, in your like smaller versions, what kind of decisions have to be taken is, I'll increase the X height from 6 to a bigger number, because it may, so the X height impacts in terms of like the readability becomes higher, your text so your different letters becomes more legible, versus like if they are just like if you use any regular the size which was supposed to be designed for, which was supposed to be used for 12 pixels and plus size, and then if you use that same for like maybe 6 pixels and then like maybe 8 pixels. So in that case, there are specific, if you are taking into consideration good typography, then you'll switch towards micro weights for smaller sizes, and then you'll use your regular weights for your like standard like body copy and then your paragraphs. And then once you go on to headings and then bigger sizes, then you switch to your like display phases, different display phases. So that's the difference. And then that's how your expansion happens. Expansion happens in terms of like, once I've completed my Latin, once I've covered like most of the European languages and something like that. And then not just European, a lot of African languages also use Latin as their base. And then beyond that, if I am expanding into different scripts, then just imagine this from my typeface, which I'm designing. So it's almost now the expansion is happening in terms of the Devanagari. So I'm designing for, maybe just imagine if I'm just designing it for languages like Hindi, then my character set would be quite different, versus if I'm also trying to include Marathi, then my character set will increase based on whatever different characters are there.
Same with Sanskrit. Sanskrit also has some special characters, and all those.
Cool. I won't get into the details, but I can tell you the basic example that again. So if you think like, to be honest, like this is a very good question, which like I always forget. So if I ask you how many characters are there in like basic Hindi your basic Hindi characters, if you count ka, kha, ga, and then a, e, and the Varnmala. So again, if you think like that's the end of, so this is how a type designer's job becomes like 100 or 1,000 time like complex, is once you move beyond Latin. Latin is the easiest thing to design, to be honest, in your life. And then once you move to like beyond Latin, then you do like what you would say, like I would term it as like something which is a very interesting part, but again quite feels like a hell at times, because in this, so in like basic Latin, you just design ABCD and then all the characters, and then you design few diacritics, which is those marks above them, like caret sign and all those kind of things. You do those characters. But in terms of Hindi, what happens is, so you have to design all the characters, all the combinations. So your Kakhaga doesn't end at ha. Your E doesn't end at that one mala. What happens is you design all the conjuncts. So you have to design how it looks when there is a adha ra. You design there is a adha ka with adha ka. So you have to design for all the conjuncts, which makes your life hell. And then the basic characters jumps from like few hundred characters to few. I won't use the word few, but thousands of characters. Once you
Holy crap.
once you are jumping into Devanagari, and then if you are like going to Arabic and all those kind of things, so that's how your life becomes very much more complex. Maybe Chinese, Korean, and then your like if you're expanding to that phase, that is another level of expansion, and then much more like it's again complex in itself. Like yeah, like the real fun, all the complex challenge happens once you like move beyond Latin, and then you jump onto non-Latin scripts.
Right. Oh, like it's so much goes, and I can see like the Iki Matra, and like it has various shapes. I'm guessing depending on which alphabet it combines with, and what if it combines with a half a letter, then you need a longer space to accommodate that half a letter, and all those crazy things we take for granted when writing Devanagari easily are so much more complicated once you start to make a system out of it. Crazy.
It's like there are two kinds of things which happen is here is like where the design also, like once the design ends, then comes the font engineering part, which is the complex part. Again, if you're downloading fonts from free sources, you won't get that. So yeah, then you'll get not defined characters, your tofus, which is like one of the reasons why the whole Noto font like Noto family was designed. So
right.
Boxes.
Right.
Cool. Moving further, you about so many things, and then when you are searching for typefaces, and then whenever you are like trying to find out like so whatever blah blah which I did. So whenever you are like kind of deciding a typeface for yourself, there is a basic question people ask: where do I find this information? Where is it available? So this is not a common kind of thing which is quite popular in India, but across, like if you go to Europe, any design event and all those kind of things, then you tend to find these different like type specimens. So every time Foundry designs basic or any typeface, first thing they design after completing is a type specimen. Specimen describes what the font is designed for, what is the purpose, what are the kind of like features which are included in it. So basically what you have to do is you so before you finalize, so this comes to your, like when you are choosing typefaces, this is the kind of document which you have to refer to, is the type specimens, where you have to go through all the information. You have to understand like what it is designed for, what are the features that I want. So just imagine like I want to I'm designing for a book which is a mathematics book, which we discuss elaborately in the conversation. Then you kind of go through the features, and then you see like mathematical symbols are available in that font or not. Like is that font like most of the like types will like explicitly say that this is designed for like maybe all the like even like chemistry formulas, this covers it. This is design keeping in mind chemistry, this is design keeping in mind like mathematical aspects. You can set those kind of things. So yeah, these typefaces, these type specimens are the things, are your go-to place in terms of finding what your typeface is designed for. And then again, this is how you kind of go away with this basic fact, like, okay, I have chosen this typeface, but does it really work for my case? So in this case, what you go about is you before you even choose a typeface, you have to describe what it is being used for, what is a design scenario. Then just imagine you are searching on web, then maybe you have 1,000 kind of options available in front of you. So if you are choosing from that 1,000 list of that 1,000 typefaces, then you are doing the biggest mistake. You don't know about typography, because you have no idea like what you are looking for. And then once you set down all these characteristics, where it's like, okay, it's design, I'm using it for an app, I'm going to set it so that app has something like maybe it's for students who are learning, who are taking different kind of courses, which include like maybe chemistry, physics, maths. And then it has to have those kind of scenarios. Then you kind of draw in, and then you immediately kind of your font selection or your type selection becomes very small. And then you see, now you have to find out a typeface which works for that kind of scenario. Then you might end up just like with like 15 options, which are 15 good options which are designed for that scenario. And then that's how you go about like picking and choosing different typefaces, and then kind of designing it for purpose, rather than picking up anything random, which is like, oh, that guy is using so this is quite a trend that, okay, everybody is using Helvetica for any kind of like scenario. Proxima Nova, like there was a time every website was Proxima Nova, and then people, it's just the hype. So if you are a good typographer, you don't follow the hype. You know your like what your application is, what your font is being designed for, what your type family has, like what features does it have. So that's your basic like purpose of like going further and then designing for like specific purpose. That's it for today, I think. Yeah.
So do not forget to follow Niteesh on Twitter as Niteesh22 and as Niteesh Yadav on Instagram. Check out his website, Niteesh Yadav. You can Google for him. He has his research work published there. You can learn more about what he, research project he's up to. And let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this video, if you learned something new that you did not know before. I'm pretty sure you will have so many questions afterwards. I have some that I want to get addressed right away. So please let us know the comments in the question. Niteesh, I have just 2 questions because we already overshot the time limitation we had with the awesomeness, but like gotta cover these 2 questions that come to my mind. One is, when we look at these fashion brands, a bunch of these brands, right, and they redo their logo, for example, Zara, right? Mm-hmm. So was that a typeface then adopted for the logo? Is it that route they take, or they just design those 4-5 characters, right? And then move on, because we see that kind of behavior as well. Some logos work like that, where only those characters are designed, versus some people like just take the type and write it and work it out as it is, which is rare. And some people take the type and modify it, like to work. So how does that work out usually?
So that depends. So there is no clear straightaway answer. It depends on the designer. So what kind of, so basically just imagine your client wants a very unique kind of flavor to it, and then he's paying you like multi-million like $1 million for your project, and then that time he expects something which is quite unique. And then in that case, like if you just like slap something which is like from existing typeface, which is the case which a lot of designers do. But again, in that case, like at times, like if the client has specifically said that I want a very unique kind of logo, which is like no like it doesn't exist for anybody is using like that, and then anybody can it's totally different. So in that case, some people take the route where they start with just like the logo, where it's quite unique lettered logo, and then in that case, like it's lettering. So it starts with lettering, and then you just imagine like you are getting popular, and then you want to take another step further, where it's almost like just imagine in that case, what happens is, just imagine I want to use, so I really like what my logo looks like. And then now it has become quite popular that people are recognizing those shapes. And then I want to carry on that, like that identity further. And
In
then
a script or something, maybe, let's say.
yeah. So and further, and then in terms of that, like they tend to get like a full character set design for them. So now what was earlier lettering is now being converted into a typeface, where it's almost like they might use it just so, because in at times it would be very stylistic approach, so they won't use it. Those things won't be designed for like text usage or maybe for paragraphs, but for headings those work really good, because again there is a connection between, like, now if you see just that heading with basic text, you might even recognize, oh, that's X brand that I have seen, because you are quite familiar with whatever the logo was there. So that kind of route a lot of like companies take, where they start with a basic lettered logo, they get a typeface design, and then kind of they expand into like maybe even some of the brands. So beyond display typefaces, they also get unique, proper paragraph, like text-based typefaces designed for them.
The last question I had, I know is a deep topic. It's a vast topic, but in brief, if you could give us a quick visual or example, or just tell us like verbally, what is the difference between kerning and tracking? Like the kerning we saw was individual letters. Like, well, how is that different from tracking?
Okay, so basically, I told you about kerning. So I had shown you those boxes. So boxes are for, like, one box would be A. So, or maybe I'll take the most conventional answer, V and A, capital V and capital A. So what happens is those come, so just imagine it into be something like, you remember your ABCD like blocks, which we used to have when we were kids. So if those blocks are there, and then there is specific, so A inside that block is fixed with specific spacing. So that's there. And then in that case, maybe I can, so maybe these two objects in front of me. So maybe just imagine this is a box for A, and then this is a box for, no, V, we were considering a V and A. So this is a box for V, and this is the box for A. So V ends here, and then A is there. And then there is a specific space between these two. And then it's almost like what will happen is, so if I see, like, if I am writing from anything with these words, then in that word, the spacing around with these characters would be quite off. In that case, what I'll do is I'll do kerning. Kerning, in case of kerning, kerning applies to only these two characters. So I will do in terms of tracking, what happens is tracking is applied to all the characters.
Right.
So, yeah, tracking, if I say like plus 10 units. So just imagine that V had like, so right side bearing of V was 20, left was maybe like 10. Then that tracking of plus 10 is added like equally.
Right.
And then equally,
regardless,
not just to one character, but all the characters in that paragraph. And kerning is like pair based, where specific pairs, VA versus like kerning, which is like the whole sentence.
Right. Mind-blowing, Niteesh. Thank you so much, folks. I hope once again you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, and we're planning a series, so please let us know your questions and what other topics we should cover. And make sure you reach out to Niteesh on Twitter and Instagram and thank him for this video. Let him know what other things you would like to learn from him on this channel. Do check out his website, his Twitter, his Instagram once again, and let us know your questions. Thank you once again for joining us. Have a good day.